William Shakespeare famously compared the stages of learning to acts performed in the theater of life.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
For example, in As You Like It, the second stage involves going to school, whether the child likes going to school or not.
Then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school.
But what are the 4 levels of learning we use today? I'm talking about stages of knowledge like concrete experience, reflective thinking, abstract thinking, personal experimentation. That's one model of 4 stages given by Kolb in a book called Experiential Learning: Experience as the Source of Learning and Development. But is this really the best way to describe the stages of the learning process? Or should we look to other models that describe these various levels of learning we go through? Ones that include the notion of unconscious competence, for example. Well, in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the topic. This is Dr. Anthony Metivier. Welcome to the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. If you're new here, we cover intermediate, beginner, advanced memory techniques, but we don't treat it as if there are such things. The teacher is always the student is always the teacher. So if you love having that ongoing support that challenges you and goes through the fundamentals over and over and over again, make sure to get subscribed at magneticmemorymethod.com. And if you already are subscribed, come on over to magneticmemorymethod.com, get into the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass if you're ready to fulfill your need for reliable memory skills. And the stages of learning are, just like I said, constantly rotating between beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Never assuming that we're too advanced for more beginner knowledge because we want that beginner's mind always switched on. And you know, this is really related to a new book I have coming out called Smarter. I don't know about you, I'm probably smart enough to get by, but I always like to get smarter. I never like to rest on my laurels. I want to continually know more and continually be ready to embrace reality for what it is. So my next book is called Smarter, and to start to celebrate the coming launch, I've put together a new video training about a very special technique that you maybe haven't encountered before called the double alphabet. It's a memory technique. And you get a sample advanced chapter of this, and I'm going to be having lots of cool and fun things for people who join me for the launch party, etc. when Smarter comes out. So if you would like to get the advanced sample chapter, if you would like to get the double alphabet training, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/SM now for everything and all the cool bonuses to come. This is going to help you make mnemonic associations faster when using memory techniques, which is what the Magnetic Memory Method is all about. Making it automatic as you might use a knife and a fork, or be able to just hop on a bike and ride. Too many people are struggling with this because they just don't set it up the right way from the beginning. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that there is one way or one right way, but there's definitely better, and it has to do with memory science. And I have studied memory science for many, many years. I've studied thousands of years of the ancient memory techniques, and I've become pretty good friends with some of the best memory competitors who have told me their secrets. I've put those secrets into my own practice and succeeded. So again, magneticmemorymethod.com/SM to be involved in the smarter revolution. Okay, so what are the 4 stages of learning? Well, as I mentioned, Kolb presents one version of the 4 levels, and this involves processing at concrete, abstract, and reflective levels of thinking. But usually, however, people are looking for the 4 levels of competence. And these originally come from a person named Martin M. Broadwell, who intended them for teachers in need of a model for their students to follow. And as a learner, we can all use these levels of learning to help navigate through complex topics. Following this particular model can also help ensure you meet your cognitive needs, like we talked about on a previous episode of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, and do so in a structured manner as you go about your learning. So let's have a look at each level in detail, the first being unconscious incompetence. So have you ever started learning something you're basically familiar with, only to realize how little you know about the topic? I've had this with music, and I don't want to diminish my own musical skills, but I've played in bands for decades. I've toured the world on stages. And when I hang out with much better musicians, I often realize how little I actually know about music. My skills have led to all kinds of incorrect intuitions as I play music, simply because I don't know the key signatures as well as some of the trained jazz musicians I know, or even trained jazz musicians I don't know. Like, it's just so obvious that they're at a next level. And so I sometimes find myself trying to play in ways that I actually don't understand enough about music to do. So I hit sounds that just, right? It just doesn't sound right. So it's like the musical version of Dunning-Kruger effect to even try. If you don't know the Dunning-Kruger effect, we'll get to it in a little bit more detail later. But I've had that, especially when I was younger.
Seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth.
I would play with musicians way ahead of me. I thought I knew more than I did, and it just led to discordant sounds where we were not intending to sound discordant. So this point is really important to understand. You don't have to be completely unfamiliar with a topic to experience unconscious incompetence. Here's an example you probably know. Captain Edward J. Smith, he was the captain of the Titanic, and he certainly knew a thing or two about sailing boats. So it wasn't like he was just a fresh fish, and it didn't stop him from following the wrong intuitions. He received multiple warnings about the dangers ahead, but he still failed to take action, and the Titanic wound up sinking. So that's an example of this particular stage of learning, and even experts can fall into that stage and wind up following incorrect intuitions. Now, the next thing is called conscious incompetence. And just to stick with music for a second, I've become much more modest over the years that I've played music, and I'm much more conscious of my incompetence with certain genres of music. And to become more competent, I study these specific areas I've become aware of, and I patch them in with deliberate practice to turn that incompetence into competence. A more famous example of conscious incompetence is someone like Elon Musk using first principles to figure out what he doesn't know. Now, I know there's a lot of critical heat on Musk right now, but just give him the benefit of history here for a second. By adding knowledge and competence, he was able to purchase various companies and improve them. So the court is still out on whether or not his conscious incompetence about Twitter will improve, but it is an example of somebody becoming aware of what they didn't know, using first principles to patch in that awareness, and doing some pretty impressive things. Now let's talk about conscious competence. At this level of knowledge, you're in the sweet spot. You can think about maybe examples like Stevie Wonder. Now, many people think he's a musical genius, including me. And although blind from birth, Stevie Wonder learned not only how to play piano and sing, he also learned how to compose and perform. Now, you might think of these as one task: composing, singing, playing piano, performing, but they're actually different things. For example, I'm consciously competent when it comes to playing concerts with bands in my preferred genre, and I can compose music relatively well and even sing to a certain degree. But playing on a stage with a band, that's a different kind of competence than being a competent studio musician. There's something that changes. It's a different level of skill when you have these super sensitive recording devices capturing every nuance that can be lost in the noise of an audience screaming and all kinds of loud distortion and echo in a concert hall. So I'm quite competent as a musician for live, but I've never developed conscious competence as a studio musician. This isn't uncommon. Many of your favorite bands, they aren't actually playing on the albums you buy. Their record companies have hired consciously competent musicians, leaving them to do what they do best: perform on stages or to write crazy music that people love. But the actual musicians are hired studio musicians. And then there are musicians who don't even write their own songs, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Many creative industries rely on detailed knowledge of conscious competence, and that way each person can focus on just their part and shine. You also see it in the film industry, where, a director is not necessarily a screenwriter. Sometimes a director is a screenwriter, but often these parts are split up. Like Shakespeare said, each person plays their role on the stage. Now, there's finally unconscious competence. And at this level of competence, the individual barely has to think about what they're doing. So again, Shakespeare, he was thought to be able to run circles around other playwrights when it came to writing incredibly powerful plots and spinning individual lines of dialogue. Or you can think about virtuoso musicians. They don't even need to see a score or rehearse. They just hop on stage with musicians they've never met and produce musical magic. I sometimes think of Robert Fripp, who, if I'm remembering correctly, it was him who said, if you don't know what you're doing, why are we in the rehearsal room together? He's looking for people who have that unconscious competence, who just simply can hear what another musician is doing and play. That's the level that they're at. So theoretically, these people have highly trained procedural memory skills, like memory competitors have. They are so good at this, they don't even have to think. They can have the clock on and memorize a deck of cards in 12 seconds or less. I've never gotten that fast, so I haven't developed that level of unconscious competence with memory techniques for cards. But I can memorize a deck of cards quite quickly, and I just haven't pushed it to that level. I haven't gotten my procedural memory to that level to learn a technique that now is used to help develop that level of speed. It's called the shadow. We've talked about that technique on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast with Braden Adams before. If you're interested in going to that level, well then, you might want to listen to the episodes with him. There's actually 2. And it's a really, really fascinating memory technique. Now, you might be wondering, why is it that I struggle with these stages of competence? Why do I have a problem learning as quickly as I might? I believe the answer is simple. Many people put the cart ahead of the horse. So I want to stick with music as an example here because I think it's really, really instructive. I once heard an interview with musician Joe Satriani, and he was answering basically a guitar student's objection that they didn't know what to learn next. They'd hit a plateau, and they had no idea. And they're trying to figure out how to do advanced soloing, but they keep getting stuck. So Satriani asks, do you know the name of every note on the fretboard? And the person did not. And then Satriani said, then you do know what you need to learn next. And he wasn't being particularly patient in his response. And he may have thought that the student had Dunning-Kruger effect. And this is an effect where people are unaware of how little they know about something, but nonetheless they suffer these memory biases that make them think that they do know more than they do. A less charitable version of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that you're too stupid to know how stupid you are. And this creates a lot of problems. And this is something that we often all get caught in, but you can catch yourself. If you're putting the cart ahead of the horse and you're giving up because you've gone to an advanced level beyond your skills, well, then that is kind of like being stupid. You should not give up on the basis of not having mastered the fundamentals. That would be silly. Why not just go back, put the cart at the back of the horse, and master those fundamentals? That's what first principles is really all about in many, many ways. So to take that card memorization thing, I have talked with memory competitors, and I can memorize a deck of cards. It takes me a little bit longer, about 2.5 minutes, as opposed to what they can do in 12 seconds and so forth. I don't use the shadow to do it, but I can do magic tricks because I have this competence. And the reason why I can do those competences is because I have gone to the fundamentals of having the deck memorized in the first place, and then I've analyzed these little itty-bitty moves that are involved they're called estimation cuts in mem deck work, is what you call that. And then you're able to determine where in the deck certain cards are and perform absolute miracles. But every time that I try a new routine that is ahead of my abilities, I have to recognize that I am trying to put the cart ahead of the horse, and I would be absolutely foolish to give up instead of just analyzing what it is that I want to learn, chunking it down, starting with beginner's mind, being humble, and then going back and developing the foundational knowledge and not being afraid to repeat certain beginner levels if I need to. Because often there are clues in the beginner trainings that are key, even if you've got 40, 50 years of experience. I know many, many philosophers, I know many, many scientists, I know all kinds of magicians, and a key trait amongst the most successful is that they're always willing to go back to the basic textbooks and check what they might have been missing. Don't put the cart ahead of the horse. That's probably why you're having trouble with the stages of knowledge, if that's the case. Okay, so we've seen that there's more than one model for the 4 levels of learning out there. Basically, if you want to be able to whip out multiple models of stages of learning, then I would suggest that you develop unconscious competence with memory techniques. They're going to help you rapidly absorb lists like these, add on examples like the ones that we've talked about today with everything from ships' captains to a variety of musicians and magicians and so forth. And I share the best ways to do this in the Magnetic Memory Method, and you can go and get the free course at magneticmerrymethod.com or just dive into the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass. When you're ready, I teach the ancient art of memory, and I mix in all that I've learned from the memory competitors, all the best memory science that I've studied, and I keep myself updated, and I keep going back to the basics. These techniques help you learn languages. They can help you learn every topic that you can imagine. All you have to do is avoid the perils of unconscious incompetence that we've talked about today, and memory itself will help you avoid the pitfalls and the perils, and you'll never ever feel discouraged because you know all you have to do is analyze what it is you're trying to do, break it down, and get back to fundamentals. So you ready to learn with greater competence? Go out there, make it happen, and remember, one of the most important stages is just getting your memory sorted out so you can keep getting smarter and be modest along the journey. So go ahead, visit specifically magneticmerrymethod.com/SM, get your free sample from my forthcoming book, Smarter, and you'll find the private double alphabet training there just for people who want to join the celebration of releasing this new book. It's going to help fulfill your stage of learning need to make associations faster so you can remember more for the long term. Thanks as always for checking out the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. And until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic. Remember that all the world's a stage and the acts are up to you to decide. And I hope that each and every act will be magnetic.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. His acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the bard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good cape and line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.